welcome to a new edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We have a great show for you today. We just came off the weekend of the Combine, so tons of Combine takeaways. We're going to do a Good Vibes Monday about some guys that really had a great weekend. And then we'll get into some rule changes possibly coming to the sport in 2024. Some very interesting topics that we talked a little bit about last week, but we'll get into more detail this week. And then we have the ACC and the Big 12 being not too happy with the SEC and the Big 10 over the new proposals for the playoff. Tons of discussion there, so we will get into all of that. But before we get into all of that, let's start with the fact that we get a lot of questions throughout the show and a lot of inquiries to be on the show, and I think the best way for y'all to get through and see your questions on the screen is use the link at the bottom of the screen, gsmcpodcast.net. It's a huge help not only to us here at the network, but to you all to see your questions across the screen, and we can have a fun back and forth here. Again, that's gsmcpodcast.net, so put your questions in there if you want to be seen on the screen. But let's start with the Combine, because that's what everyone was talking about this weekend. That's what a ton of college football fans were watching to see how their favorite players would do this weekend, and some guys really showed out. And I think the place everyone's going to start this morning, and the place that I will start, is Xavier Worthy, breaking the 40-yard dash record, ran a 4.21. He was just absolutely flying. And a super awesome moment in that stadium. Not only you could see the look on his face when he realized he had a shot to break it and had tied it at the time. And then the crowd getting into it was just an all-time moment. So a very, very cool moment for him, and very, very cool moment for the fans in attendance to see that in real time. But tons happened yesterday, or tons happened throughout the weekend. We had a ton of guys burst onto the scene, a ton of guys, not necessarily perform up to what they would like, but I think it all started, and a lot of the talk throughout the weekend was about JJ McCarthy. And I think that was expected going into the weekend with the top three quarterbacks sitting. That quarterback 4 position seems to be his, at least according to most people, he seems to be sitting in that spot. So it wasn't surprising that he was kind of the talk of the town. And although throughout the throwing drills he was a little bit inconsistent at times, missed some out routes that teams would have loved to see him hit, I think he had a really solid day. It wasn't necessarily the perfect thing that he had dreamed up, I'm sure, but as a quarterback, he showed his athletic ability, was 5th overall in the 3-cone drill, which is just insane among the running backs and wide receivers he was going up against. But overall had a really good workout, showed that, he can make the requisite throws that are necessary, so I wouldn't be surprised if there were some teams that were finding their way up the board to get JJ McCarthy. I saw a mock draft by Cam Marino that had Minnesota trading up to the 4 spot to grab him, which with Kirk Cousins, possibly heading out of town, I don't think that's much of a surprise. I think there is, some merit to possibly he'll be there later in the draft, but as we've known, teams don't like to take that risk. So if Minnesota really likes him, I wouldn't be surprised if they traded up to 4 and he ended up being the 4th straight quarterback to come off the board. So we'll see what happens there. But a couple other quarterbacks that had really solid days. Joe Milton had some viral moments for sure with his absolute cannon on the right side of his torso. The dude threw a ball, I think, 73.5 yards, which is 4 yards longer than the longest pass in the NFL last year from Josh Allen, which was 69.3, I believe. So absolutely just a beast of a human. I mean, can sling the ball a million miles. In the Orange Bowl, when he kind of broke onto the scene against Clemson, threw an orange 106 yards, which is always just a fun thing to watch. A guy just absolutely sling something. So Joe Milton's a very fun quarterback. There's no two ways about that. When you watch him throw a deep ball, it is just jaw-dropping, and it dropped a lot of jaws around Indianapolis, I'm sure. So I will say for him, it's a lot about consistency and accuracy, which we'll get into a little bit later. But he did well for himself yesterday, or on Saturday, excuse me. I don't think there's any question about that. Whether or not, it translates into getting drafted, whether or not people kind of overlook some of the tape that's out there and take him, I don't know. But he definitely had a solid day. And then Michael Penix, who is one of the more gifted throwers in the entire draft, had a really good day. Showed off what he's really capable of, showed off the ability for... He can just absolutely spin it. The ball moves just faster in that spiral than pretty much any other quarterback that was there. Had the arm strength, did a ton of really good things. So he's another quarterback that a lot was up in the air this week, and he answered a lot of the questions that people had about him. So it'll be interesting to see what that develops into throughout pro days and everything like that. But I think Michael Penix did a really solid job and definitely caught the eyes of some teams this weekend. But one of the major things that stood out to me, and I'm sure to a lot of people that were watching, is this wide receiver class is just remarkable. We knew about the top three guys. We knew Marvin Harrison Jr. is an athletic freak. We knew Rome Odunze is as technical and proficient of a route runner as we've seen in a while. We knew Malik Neighbors was so complete and fast and can make people miss and all of these incredible things with those top three guys. But everyone else showed out. It felt like Brian Thomas and A.D. Mitchell running a 4.34 at their size is just insane. It shouldn't be possible. We talked about Xavier Worthy bursting onto the scene with his 40-yard dash. Lad McConkey had an incredible day showing off his ability to catch essentially anything around him and make everything look very, very easy. His gauntlet run was just incredible. And then there's other guys deeper in the class. You got Malachi Corley, Malik Washington, Ricky Pearsall, Keon Coleman, Tez Walker. So tons of guys to pick from in this class. I think there are a ton of teams that might be drafting in the first round and say, we can wait until the second or third and still get a very good wide receiver that can help us right away. So it'll be interesting to see the approach from teams on the wide receiver position just because of how deep that position really is. As for the running back class, it was kind of an up and down day. I think they had some really good moments. Trey Benson had a great 40 time, which a lot of us expected. Jalen Wright showed off incredible athletic ability in the broad jump and the 40. So both those guys had great days with the assumed running back one right now and Jonathan Brooks not participating. They had a really good day to help them out. Possibly there's some teams out there that have them in the top spot for right now, but some lower level guys that had great days were Kamani Vidal out of Troy, and then Isaac Garindo out of Louisville had an incredible day, led the running backs in 40 time. We'll get into both those guys a little bit later. But a really cool moment in this entire combine, one of the cooler moments next to Xavier Worthy's 40 run was Dallin Holker going through the gauntlet, and he, I guess, did not think there was another ball to be thrown, started to turn upfield, looked back, found the ball, and caught it with one hand, so he's running down the field with two balls. So although that is obviously, not the most remarkable thing in the world, or I don't think any team is going to make a decision based off of that by any means, but a very cool moment and showed his athletic ability and his concentration in those moments. So definitely showed something, I'll tell you that. As for the cornerback class, it was kind of an interesting day for a lot of guys. Nate Wiggins weighed in at 173, which is not necessarily the ideal size you wanted him to be at. Above 180 would have been great for him, but at the end of the day, still tons of talent around him. He ran a 4.28 in the 40, so tons of speed, tons of ability, but as we saw last year, Emmanuel Forbes weighed in at 166 and then got drafted in the first round and just had a really tough year, especially in the run game. So it could be that teams are a little bit more wary of taking someone like Nate Wiggins because of what happened with Emmanuel Forbes a year ago, but also Emmanuel Forbes, another guy that is plenty talented, the ability is still there. So I wouldn't be surprised if Nate Wiggins still found himself in the first round, late second round, because the ability's there, but the size is less than desirable, I would say. But for the rest of the cornerback class, I think it's really hard to put a pin on the ordering of all of this. I think one guy that really, in my eyes, kind of locked up his case for cornerback one is Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo. Everything was good. There was not a part of that session where he looked choppy, where he looked out of sync. He just looked very under control the entire time, was around the top in pretty much every measurement, so did a ton of things really well. And then a guy kind of off the radar a little bit, Kamari Lassiter from UGA, had a really good day. Showed his ability to track balls, which is absolutely remarkable from the cornerback position. Some of the plays he made last year are just jaw-dropping. So he's someone that I think caught a lot of teams' eyes and possibly played himself into the second day. But it'll be interesting to see how he kind of can build off this when it comes to top 30 visits and pro day and all of the things that stand between now and draft day. But Kamari Lassiter made a great first impression, that's for sure. Someone in the back end that did not necessarily have the best day is Cam Kitchens. I talked about him last week as a guy that had a chance to make some real noise this week with the void that is left in the safety class at safety number one. And Cam Kitchens did not do a great job of kind of taking advantage of all that. He really struggled in a lot of the workouts, and he has plenty of good game tape out there, but this weekend did not help. I can't imagine that there weren't a lot of people coming into this week thinking safety is entirely up for grabs for who we think is the best guy, and I can't imagine Cam Kitchens impressed a ton of people, but still a ton of good game tape out there. We'll see what happens with him, but obviously not the combine that he wanted. A guy that absolutely lit the world on fire yesterday was Joe Alt. He did everything incredibly well. Measured in at almost 6'9", which is just insane. I think he's offensive tackle number one. Olu Fashanu probably following right after him, but so many good guys in this class. You have Amarius Mims right after them, Troy Fatanu right after them, so tons of depth in this class. Roger Rosengarter, another guy out of Washington, so tons of really, really talented guys that you can get in the second or third round instead of, the top two guys in Joe Alt and Olu Fashanu, which will probably be top 10 picks. But it'll be interesting to see how all of this comes to fruition. I think Joe Alt is set in offensive tackle one spot, but we'll see what happens there. And then just kind of a final takeaway for this combine, from my point of view, is there should never be another combine without fans. This was the best atmosphere, was super fun, brought the best out in the players, which is obviously the most important thing in this, right? You want to give the players the best ability to show what they're really about and not be in their own head with the pin drop silence that used to be in Lucas Oil during this workout. But you could tell the fans were really into it. You could feel the energy in that room when, Worthy broke the 40 or Joe Milton threw the incredible pass. So there were a lot of moments throughout the combine that I think a lot of people really enjoyed because the fans were there. So they should have fans every single year. It shouldn't be a question from now on, and add more fans. Make it, a real spectacle, because it's really fun to see these guys show off their athletic ability, because a lot of these guys are absolute freaks. So very excited to see that continue in the future, I hope. And then it'll be interesting to see just how all of this takes shape. Tons of guys did really good work, but at the end of the day, like we talked about last week, the combine means varying things to different teams. So we'll see how each team takes this into account, and we'll see who comes out on top for a lot of these guys that are very highly coveted after this week. But that'll do it for the combine talk for now. When we come back, we're going to get into the new rule changes coming across college football. Tons of very interesting stuff to get to. So when we get back, we will talk about that, but stick around.